there's a distinction to be made between this approach and other approaches, namely, traditional diet plans where you're trying to be good. You're trying to follow really a formula, like, even a formula in terms of the amount of calories you should be consuming from whatever carbohydrates, from your proteins. I mean, really, some of these diet programs, they boil down to very precise plans. And this is not a precise plan, but there's a principle, which is making self-honoring choices feels a lot better. And it doesn't feel better in the sense of good versus bad. It's really building the qualities that we want in relationship with our bodies, with the food that we consume, and with our lives in general. But even once we know that, then there really is an element of work involved in staying, clear and staying consistent and continuing to honor ourselves.
Yes, and I think the biggest difference now is that I can have the chips, and instead of eating 3/4 of the bag, I'll have a few, and I realize, oh, what are you doing here?
Right.
And so I'm not having as much, it's I realize what I'm doing, and so I say, okay, well, that's not really the choice I want to make. It's okay, you had some, but let's move on to something different.
Yeah. No, it's interesting, too, because one of the things I brought up is that oftentimes the foods I go for have become an indication of what's going on for me. For example, the salty crunchy, the chips, these kinds of foods that are the snack foods, those are where I go with anxiety. And oftentimes, if I'm feeling anxious, even if I've just had a meal, in other words, I'm content in terms of hunger, and I find myself like perusing the kitchen cabinets, right? I'm scoping for something, and it's an indication to me that there's stress going on. And so the answer then becomes to interrupt the pattern and go to one of my practices. So my practices are various things: going for a walk, taking a bath. The self-soothing is the bathing. The walking is, taking my anxiety for a walk and really breathing and moving through it, going into meditation. There's a whole series of ways that I can interrupt the pattern and make a choice that really then honors the stress that I'm feeling and meets the need, which is a different way of coping, or in my language actually is to process the stress. So the stress actually becomes a way of informing myself about what's going on.